And good morning, everybody. Welcome to Peggy's Place this morning on KGUA in Gualala, 88.3 FM. I'm Peggy Berryhill, along with Leigh and guest this morning, Michael Yaki. We're going to talk to him. He is an attorney. He's local. He lives at Sea Ranch. He is also a political columnist and analyst, and we're going to get a lot of information from him. But before we go there, just want to remind you today's weather is looking pretty nice outside, and we may get as high as 70. It's 56 right now, so it's a little bit more normal. It seems like we've left August behind, and September is turning, as it often is, into our nice end of summer days. So we're all happy about that. Leanne is going to give you some messages. I'm going to give you a little bit of news, and then we're going to get started.
All right. We have an announcement from the CLSD, the Coast Life Support District, that they responder course that's coming up September the 14th through the December 11th, and about 93 classroom hours are total, Tuesdays and Thursdays, 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. So if you'd like to expand your first responder medical skills and in preparation for becoming an EMT, you can do 7-972-643-83 or contact the CLSD. And today is Thursday, every Thursday, 8:30 to 12:30 p.m. It is the free pet vaccine clinic at Stewarts Point, right across from Two Fish Bakery. And that is, again, by Spirit Veterinary Services. No appointment is necessary. It's on a first come, first served basis, 8:30 to 12:30. And then it is this time of the year again when traditionally we gather to celebrate life, art, wine, and music at Wine Song up in Mendocino. And this year, the Wine Song Charity Auction needs your support more than ever. It is produced by the Mendocino Coast Healthcare Foundation and provides essential funds to support the health and wellness on the Mendocino coast through direct grants to the hospital, clinics, fire departments, and social service entities that care for our community. And you can participate in this online auction by going to winesong.org, and that does start today, September the 9th, and goes till Sunday, September the 12th. And it's really a good cause for our coast. And the present other desert cities coming up this September the 16th through the 19th and the 23rd through the 26th at 4 p.m. It is free admission, limited seating, so reservations are necessary. You can contact the Sea Ranch Thespians at searanchthespians.com or call 785-2548. Parking cards will be provided at the entrance to the White Barn where the play is held. And it's a wonderful experience. And they do have lots of protections and restrictions regarding COVID, and they're going to be safe at the play there. And then coming up on radio and simulcast to YouTube, we are holding the third annual Ocean Life Symposium brought to you by Mendonoma Whale and Seal Study. And that's Scott and Tree Mercer, along with your friends here at KGUA. We are helping them simulcast this conference with speakers from all across the country. They have been working very hard behind the scenes to get some of the top-notch speakers on this symposium that goes Monday, October 25th through Friday, October 29th. Each day we're going to be doing about 3 hours each day from 9 a.m. to noon. And that is the Ocean Life Symposium. And then let's see, I don't know how many more we want to go into. We've got so many. But one important thing is a note from St. Jude's Pediatric Hospital. They said that as children head back to school, there is a record-breaking number of 250,000 plus children that have been hospitalized for COVID. And it says America's children are in a very dangerous situation with record numbers of children hospitalized due to COVID. And the Delta variant continues to surge among not only adults, but children younger than 12 who are not yet eligible for the life-saving vaccine. And they said that every eligible American over the age of 12 should get the COVID vaccine as soon as possible. And if a child is not eligible, those in close contact should be taking additional precautions, such as masking up to protect them.
Thank you, Leanne, for all of those announcements. I'm going to continue on for just a second. Our latest message, and this comes from our friends at Mendocino Voice, the newspaper in Mendocino. The Adventist Health list gave us some new information on our very own COVID numbers here in Mendocino County. And yesterday, on the 8th, 3 more Mendocino County residents have died from COVID-19. And they're a little younger group, 51-year-old woman, an 85-year-old man, a 68-year-old woman from Covelo, all unvaccinated, and that brings a total of deaths from the virus in our county to 7 people in the past week, 14 deaths since July 29th, meaning more than 23% of the total deaths since the COVID pandemic began.
And that's Mendocino County.
Right. And there have been 64 people who have died from the virus overall prior to the recent surge due to the Delta variant. And so we want to emphasize again how important it is to get a vaccine, get vaccinated. And I want you to think about this as well, because the hospitals all over the globe, but certainly our hospitals, our local hospitals, are inundated with COVID patients. A lot of them have not been vaccinated. And what that means is if you need a surgery, it's going to be put off for months, possibly. I just talked to an orthopedist yesterday who said knee surgeries are 6 months out before you can even consider getting an appointment for a knee surgery. This COVID is affecting everything, and those who are not vaccinated are adding an extra burden. It's unnecessary. These people who are taking up hospital beds, of course, the hospital is going to want to take care of you. We want you to get well, but you're also blocking healthcare for many, many patients with different needs, and they have immediate needs. This isn't just about this personal opinion that you can say, oh, I don't need it. And if I do get it, I'll be fine. I'll just go to the hospital. Well, what's happening is those who are not vaccinated are ending up in the hospital by literally hundreds of thousands across the country. And they are blocking entry to people who also need health care needs as well. Think about that. It might be your father, your cousin, your nephew, your grandchild. Someone else might have an emergency need and not be able to get it because you didn't get vaccinated. And of course, COVID patients are going to get the priority. This is a major global situation. We cannot emphasize this enough. It's not about me, the individual. It's about us humans. It's about our community. And right here in our own Mendocino County, we know how it's been affecting us. We all have family members. Our restaurants, our businesses are up and down, open, closed. We have businesses that are temporarily closing so that their people can get some respite. And the last thing I'm going to say before we get to our guest, thank you, Michael, for being so patient. But the last thing I'm going to say is also please be kind to each other and be mindful. Our businesses are asking you, whether it's the gas station, whether it's a grocery store, whatever it is, the bank, they're asking you politely, wear your mask. Wear your mask. Don't fight with people. If you don't want to wear a mask, go shop somewhere else. It's really quite that simple. And I can say that on behalf of many of our vendors. They don't want to lose money, but they also don't want to lose people. They don't want to lose staff members. They don't want to lose community members. If you don't want to wear a mask and our businesses are asking you to wear one, don't get mad at them. Don't, give them bad hand signals and bad language and be belligerent. Go somewhere else. Just go somewhere else who will accept your business. But that's how important it is. Nobody wants to fight with each other, but we do want healthy communities. So please keep that in mind. Don't go to some place and fight with somebody just because they won't let you wear a mask, because you don't want to wear a mask. Go somewhere else. No one needs that kind of disruption in their workplace. They don't need their employees to be treated belligerently and rudely. We've all witnessed this. We've heard stories of it. It's wrong. It is just wrong. So let's try, get through this together, take your business elsewhere. And for the rest of you, please wear those masks. That's it.
Thank you, Peggy.
You're welcome. Okay, let us introduce you to Michael Yaki. Michael Yaki is an attorney. He is a political analyst. He is on the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights right here in our backyard. I had no idea. I have such high respect for the Commission on Civil Rights, and we're going to want to talk about that. You can see him very often, almost daily right now on KRON4. He also has his own, is this a podcast? The Politically Smart
Ask.
Yeah.
Ask, yeah. That's on KRON On, which is the streaming service, KRON4, yeah.
Great. Well, all right. Well, let's just go from there. I mean, Michael, you have a long career in the Bay Area. You were on the Board of Supervisors at one point. You worked with Nancy Pelosi. I want to talk about that. You worked with Willie Brown, the famous.
I was living in San Francisco back then.
Yeah. So, and
but did you vote for me? That's all I want to know, Leanne. So come on. Okay, thank you.
And boy, does that get us directly into politics.
Yeah.
We have a recall coming up next week.
Yeah.
Leanne and I watched your report this morning. In fact, why don't we see a little bit of that? This is from KRON4 this morning. We're not going to see the whole thing.
Well, it's not from this morning, but it is the most recent.
Okay.
This is, let's see, not that one, but it's the one that you said you're 1 week from California. Well, it was really recent. I guess
it was on Tuesday.
It was on Tuesday. All right.
Yeah.
Share a little
and
bit.
I'm going to, I have to go to share screen here.
And while Leanne's doing that, I also want to remind you we are doing this live on KGUA's YouTube channel,
Yes,
we know that you are really, thank you all you viewers who are watching us. Our numbers are up in the hundreds, Michael, and for a tiny community like this, that means a lot. It's not KRON's statistics, but we're very proud of the work we're doing here. So let's
great.
A little bit about this.
Yeah, we're up to 750 for the GM, the new GM of the Sea Ranch Lodge, and over about 300 for the new owner of the Gualala Hotel and Antonio's. And so we really appreciate our YouTube watchers out there. And right now we're going to play this clip from KRON4 with Michael Yaki, the political analyst that we're talking with today.
Election headquarters, and the recall election is now just 1 week away from today.
And Governor Newsom will be in the Bay Area this morning to campaign against the recall effort. And joining us now to talk more about that is our political analyst, Michael Yaki. Good morning, Michael.
Good morning.
So it
1
looks,
week.
So what a week. Well, what a week to go. And it looks like things are turning around for Gavin Newsom. We just did a poll and it looks like things are changing for his favor as far as his favorability rating goes.
Let's pull up the numbers here and have you react to them.
Sure.
Among those surveyed, 39 said that they would still vote yes on the recall, but 58% say they vote no. That's got to be encouraging for the governor.
Of course it does. And it pretty much mirrors his election victory 2 years ago, where he won 60 to 40. And all along, the fact that this was going to be a mail-in ballot, that everyone was going to get a ballot at their home, was going to make it a lot easier for Newsom to beat back this recall, because it's not about dragging people to the polls, it's just getting them to fill it out and put it in the mail, which is a lot easier, which we saw in the November election, how turnout just exploded in California when everyone had the opportunity to just do it, fill it out on their desk at home.
And that was just an excerpt from KRON News from just a Tuesday. Michael, you look just the same as you did a couple of days ago, and you don't
right.
see. There's
a picture of me in the attic somewhere, and it just ages while I stay the same each day to day. So.
Oh, that's kind of scary. Hey, you don't seem to be very worried about the recall. A week ago, the national press was all, it was all doomsday for Newsom. It was things were looking different. What do you think? I mean, you mentioned the mail-in ballots, but what else do you think has made the difference? Why is there a turning point now?
Well, I think what's interesting is that the Republicans made, I think, two so far seemingly fatal choices. And again, a lot can happen between now and then. I mean, if all of a sudden the number of ballots from being mailed in just stopped and it all relied on election day turnout, that would get people a little nervous because that turnout is expected to be heavily Republican. Remember in November, we were talking about the blue shift, that you would have these red votes coming in, and then the blue numbers would start to come in from the different counties and states would start to change, where you're going to see a red shift in this election because the predominant, right now at least, Democrats are outperforming registration. What does that mean when people say that? Well, we're about 46% of the registered voters in California. We're about 56% of the people returning their ballots right now. So that's what you mean by running ahead of your registration. So what you're going to find on election night is the early returns will have been counted 2 days before and be released around 8:01 p.m. on Tuesday night. And you can find all this out and watch me on KRON4 News all night on election night, because I'm going to be helping to anchor the election coverage that entire evening. And then what you'll see about 8:45, 9 p.m., 10 is that the same day voters, the people who went to the polls, those numbers will start to come in, and then the numbers will start to trend red. Whether it will be enough to overcome the amount of blue that's already in the ballots, that's really what this is all about. And that's where all the prognosticators are saying, well, when you look at how many Democrats have returned in their registration, this might be a low turnout vote. But if the Democrats are returning the ballots at a much higher rate at 2-1 than the Republicans, chances are very good that Newsom will beat back the recall.
Well, for the Newsom fans, that's really good news. What advice do you have for people who still haven't mailed in their ballots or are going to show up at the polls? Because this ballot also, it's not just as simple as saying, I don't agree with the recall. You also have to write in a candidate that would be then the next would-be governor, right, if Newsom is recalled. So what advice do you have for people?
Well, I mean, to get back to your first question, which I didn't quite finish answering, the second mistake that the Republicans made was that they didn't, well, two mistakes. They didn't endorse anyone at their convention because they figured they didn't want to turn off any Republican supporters of those people from getting out to vote no on Newsom. That, I think, was a mistake, because what that did is it left the field wide open to someone who had name recognition, and that was Larry Elder. That was mistake number one. Mistake number two was letting Larry Elder skip the debates and just say whatever he wants, because what has happened and what has provided the opening for Gavin Newsom is that Elder, for reasons that make very little sense, had decided to simply play to the Trump base. And playing to the Trump base in California is not a winning strategy. Maybe in Ohio, maybe in Arkansas, yes, but in California, that's not going to get you there. The discontent, for example, against Gray Davis in 2003 was broad-based, and it wasn't political. It wasn't about George Bush and the Iraq War. It was about the fact that our power got cut off, people were freezing, things weren't going well, there was an air of corruption in the air. It was all centered around people's frustration. The economy was taking a dip, and all of that was centered around Gray Davis. You have a confluence of things here: the pandemic, joblessness, people worried about being evicted. That is all in the ether. But what does Larry Elder do? He talks about replacing Dianne Feinstein. He talks about going against enacting anti-abortion laws. He talks about how his misogyny misogynistic attitudes toward women come out in interviews. He just doubles down on these on these Neanderthal-like tropes that distract away from what he could have done or what the Republicans could have done, which is use the recall, which I've often called on KRON4, is sort of your free shot to sort of have a personal temper tantrum against the incumbent in office and say, I don't like you today, I'm voting no. They're not getting to that threshold question, because instead Newsom's been able to turn it into, look at what this guy's going to do. He's going to make us like Florida. He's going to make us like Texas. He's going to make us like all these other states that that the majority of Californians do not like. So they lost that opportunity. I don't think there's not enough. I do not believe there's enough time for them to get that back. So, 5 days from now, 6 days from now, we'll see what 5 days. Today's Thursday. 5 days from now, we'll know for certain. But I'm pretty confident right now that what could have been an opportunity has been lost, and there's not enough time for them to make it up. And the Democrats are returning the ballots. People are knocking on doors. You're getting texts on your phone to make sure you return your ballot, and he'll probably win, I think, pretty easily.
Well, that's a great analysis. It makes me wonder, though, coming up, the lessons that Republicans might learn from this coming up for the next presidential election, if they're sticking with this kind of base, the base accusations, the base stories that they're making up. As you say, they don't work in California. There's a lot of states that they might not work in. I don't know if they will learn from this or not. I even recall Larry Elder talking about reparations for slave owners. What are going to bring back plantations? I mean, that just doesn't work for many, many people. So are they going to be smart enough to learn from this?
No, I mean, what you see nationally, and this is one of the many different hats that I wear in life, is I also served as the chair for the past 2 years. I just termed out for the Board of Advisors of the U.S. Election Assistance Commission, and I deliberately chose to run for chair and stay on, the first one to ever be elected twice in a row, by the way. Because I wanted to be in that position for the 2020 election, and because of the concerns that everyone had. Now, the concerns we had going in were more about cyber hacking and interference from foreign countries. As it turns out, the aftermath of that is more about what people are trying to do to completely subvert the idea that anyone's vote can count. And so what you see nationally, what the Republicans have adopted the strategy of, they know that the Trump base is very limited. They know that they can only go so far in drawing attention and support for these ideas that are not rooted in where America is going in the next 10, 15, 20, 30 years. We are changing, we continue to change. That's part of the strength and beauty of our country. They don't want to go there. So what they've decided to do is they've adopted the strategy of simply, well, if we can't win the hearts and minds of the voters, we'll just enact systems to try and make sure that no matter what their hearts and minds say in the ballot booth, that we continue to control what the actual outcome is. And so that's why you've seen these hundreds of different voting laws being enacted across the country in different states, where you see that they're restricting the ability for people to get to the ballot, how to vote. And more importantly, and the more insidious thing, is going and stripping away the powers of independent election boards and even secretaries of state, and resigning the power now to determine an election, not based on the popular vote, but on a political vote in a Republican-controlled legislature. And if you think about that, if we allow this to continue, if Joe Biden doesn't, in the Congress, don't pass the For the People Act and the John Lewis Civil Rights Act, unless you have the legal tools to go after these anti-democratic, pro-authoritarian measures, we are slipping ever so carefully, ever so subtly, but ever so fast into an authoritarian state. That thing which, many people made millions of dollars making movies parodying or prognosticating, about some sort of, Pax America fascist state. We could actually be there. And it's ironic that the party of limited government, the party of that has continually talked about limiting government, is the one that's actually creating systems where government can override the will of the American people. That's the Republican Party.
Now, Michael, that is so frightening and yet so apparent, because it's not just the voting rights. We look at abortion rights. We look at all kinds of areas where the far right is attacking on those small local levels. So you have so many fires to put out, and then watching out for the large national pieces. It's time to remind people, Leanne.
You're listening to Peggy's Place. I'm Leanne Lindsey, along with Peggy Berryhill, and we are talking today with Michael Yaki. He is a political analyst with KRON4 and also has ties in politics way back, as you can hear. We are streaming around the world at KGUA.org, on apps Radio Garden and TuneIn, and we're on 88.3 FM along the Mendocino and Sonoma coasts.
Old-fashioned radio in your car.
Radio.
Hey, Michael, I want to step
and
back.
On YouTube, so we forgot that part.
Oh, YouTube Live.
Right.
Right. So
multi-platform.
Right.
We are tiny but mighty here, and hopefully you'll have a chance to visit us sometime soon. Hey, I want to go. There's so many things that you have brought up, and we have such limited time. One thing I want to talk about, though, is the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights. Tell us just briefly about your involvement there and how important and what kind of strength do they have politically?
Well, I'm very honored to have been on and continue to be on the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights. I'm in my 16th year, my third term. The Commission on Civil Rights is comprised of 8 people across the country, 4 appointed by the president, 4 appointed by the leaders of the parties in the Senate and the House. So I have been the fortunate, had the privilege and the fortune of being the appointee of my former boss and mentor, Speaker Nancy Pelosi, beginning in 2005 and continuing on to this day. And the Commission on Civil Rights is essentially the official watchdog for civil rights in the federal government. And it's been in effect since 1957 after the riots in Little Rock. And what you have here is a body that has investigative power and the ability to make recommendations to both the executive and the Congress on changes that need to be made. And over the course of our lifetime, the investigative reports that the commission did in the South became the factual predicate that's helped sustain challenges to and created the 1964 Voting Rights Act. Issues about disparity in immigration led to the 65 Immigration Act. The first reports that we did about the violence against women in the 60s and the 70s led to the first statutes being enacted across the country that were designed to protect against domestic violence. And the work that we did on the rights of people with disabilities led to the ADA passage in 1991. I mean, it's a commission with a great tradition, great history, great honor, and even today we continue to fight that fight. What's happened is that over years, it has been, like so many other institutions, become a little more politicized than it should be. Reagan first started to do that in the 80s. Bush did, and Trump did the same thing. We are at an unfortunate place right now where we have four conservative appointees and 4 liberal appointees, and you can guess which side I'm on. So we're just trying to negotiate our way around how we try to work together on different things and pick items. But I've had the fortune of serving with tribal leaders across this country. I know, Peggy, that that's important to you. We've done work on the disparity of medical care on Native American reservations. We followed that up with a report on the disparity of treatment and getting aid out to the reservations because of COVID. That report was going to be published, but was unfortunately killed by the Republicans. You need a majority of commissioners to vote for it, and they blocked it by using all 4 of their votes. So those are the kinds of things we go along, although we still, because I have my ways, we have ways of getting that information out anyway to people, so that researchers and most importantly, the people in Congress know what's going on and can get that kind of information and use it as part of their oversight. Because what was very clear is that certainly during 2020, during the Trump administration, the ability of the federal government to get aid out to our Native American communities was horrible at best, a national disgrace at worst. Whether it was medical care, whether it was vaccine, whether it was just economic aid to those communities, it was taking months upon months after Congress appropriated the money for the departments to even realize that they could do anything about it, despite the fact that they had, leaders from communities across the country, basically camped on their doorstep saying, would you please get this money out? Our communities are in deep trouble. So that watchdog role is important. We continue to fulfill it, and it's something that I'm extremely proud of in my career. And I have 2 years left, and I think 18 years is a good long run. If the speaker wishes me to serve another 6 years, I'd be honored to do that too. But we'll just see what happens.
Well, let me stop you there for a moment. And of course, we thank you very much. I'm going to thank you on behalf of all Indians. I'm just going to be, I'm going to take that role today. And the irony, I have to say, before this nation in the past, 8 years becomes so polarized, the irony was before that, the Republicans were the party that did the most for Native Americans. And that's always so strange for people to hear. It's not so now, but there was a point when they did a lot more, returning Blue Lake to Taos, doing all other kinds of things. But now, no, not so much. And with the poverty and just if you're the Navajo reservation, you're gigantic, or you could be like one of our tiny rancherias, as you know, just to the south
Right.
of you, with Kashaya to the north of us. Point Arena, Manchester, tiny communities and struggling for their sovereignty.
Right.
We talk about that a lot, and people still don't understand that nations are sovereign entities.
That's
They're
right.
not these isolated communities that people like to ignore. They're actually sovereign. So we'll have to, talk more about that at some other point. I hope Deb Haaland
Sure.
has a lot of strength behind her. Go ahead.
But one issue on voting rights, for example, that we find is that because they are sovereign nations, and because, and this is one of those oddities of how life works, because a lot of times that the streets in those nations are not recognized by the U.S. Postal Service. Everyone has an R&R box or a P.O. box. Well, what you're finding is that Republicans in states with large numbers, like Alaska especially, are trying to basically say that unless you're registered at a street address, you cannot get a ballot.
Right.
And they're effectively disenfranchising entire communities of Native Americans because of that quirk about how, when the sovereign land comes up against state or just local land, and it's one of those tragedies that you see, that a deliberate tragedy enacted by people who only want to keep themselves in power and ensure that communities are disempowered. I mean, we can go on and on with Latino, with the African American, with other communities, but that's what we face on a daily basis going on right now. And there was a moment, I think, I've been in politics for quite a bit, but I remember when the Voting Rights Act was reauthorized with a unanimous vote in both the House and the Senate. And that was, not too long ago. I think it was 2005. And now you see what's happening right now. No, the Voting Rights Act has been gutted by the Roberts Court, and they're gutting it. They've gutted it again, and you see what's going on with these legislatures doing even more.
Absolutely. All of our relatives in North and South Dakota, as you say, who don't have street addresses, are being disenfranchised in Alaska, all of these areas. And it is, as you started out earlier this morning, talking about this move that is taking us farther and farther to totalitarianism. And a lot of people either are not seeing that, or they're just buying the polarization. Oh, it's just politicizing something like vaccines. It's the thinking, the lack of critical thinking when it comes to this. Okay, we only have
it's a lack of history. Peggy. It's a lack. I mean, I've talked about this with my wife a lot, and who, by the way, worked on Capitol Hill as well. That's kind of how we met, and we stay active, we stay involved, and she's like my best coach and advisor in a lot of these things. But I've been thinking more and more about the fact that a lack of history in people's minds, that there's a vision of World War II, there's a vision of who Hitler was, but no one really appreciates how Hitler came to power. He did not come to power with violence. He came to power at the ballot box. People voted for Hitler, and they willingly, piece by piece, surrendered their liberty because of the need for safety, security, fear, whatever it was. We can do that. Can happen anywhere. It has happened in other countries, but it could happen here. Hitler was not a man who took force by power. He did it by a vote. And we have to be very, very careful about people today who are trying to use that same type of thing, use the ballot, however way you want to cook it, however way you want to rig it, however way you want to manipulate it, but to legitimize their taking power and imposing an authoritarian regime on this country. And that's to me the biggest danger for the next 10 years.
Wow, you well said. When you talk about what's the lack of education systems in this nation, and that includes all of that history that is, we don't get much of an education. And people like myself who have been in public media now for 50 years, a long time, trying to fill in that imbalance with authentic reports and information. Now we're very after a lot of hard work, we have a lot of native radio stations. We have native news. We even have a TV channel. But that doesn't mean that the people who might need that are going to watch it or get educated by it or listen to it. We do work very hard in public media here to share as many types of voices as we can. So again, I want to thank you for joining us. I want to get to
before you move on, I just wanted to make a comment on the part that you talked about before, actually two parts. Speaking as a Texan, one thing that does really concern me about Texas is the law that allows a neighbor to turn another neighbor in. And it's draconian. It is so draconian. And you brought up 1957 as the start of Civil Rights Commission. Well, that was the last year that my dad was Speaker of the Texas House of Representatives. And so there's a lot of history that was wrapped up there with LBJ and everything that was going on in the United States. So it's part of my life as well as watching how he progressed through life. He was a Democrat back then, and then he switched over to a Republican back around, I think it was around the Reagan years. But speaking of all of this, as far as what's happening in Texas now, it would shock him. It would really shock him. So he would not understand it.
We hope a lot of people in Texas are being shocked, and it seems like they are. But again, with the kind of news that we get from the mass media, it's not always helpful to us get a perspective. I want to step back in your history for a moment, and you worked with Nancy Pelosi many years ago, and she has been considered as the most politically astute Speaker of the House in history
of the United States.
Well, yeah. So, what do you? Would you agree with that statement? And what would you?
Absolutely. I mean,
how did she do that?
I was fortunate to work with the Speaker. I used to call her Nancy all the time. I have to call her the Speaker. On her first campaign back in 1987 as a young volunteer. And then a few years later, she just called me up out of the blue and asked me to run her office. And I did that for 7 years. She, people at their peril underestimate Nancy Pelosi, and they have continued to do so time and time again. They threw, things that they thought were pejoratives at her. She was just a housewife. She was just a fundraiser. And she was, she managed people very well. She knew how to raise money. And these things she's leveraged into becoming, as you say, the most powerful speaker, I think, in American history. Obamacare would not exist today without Nancy Pelosi convincing the president to bring it to the floor to a vote, because she said, I have 218 votes. This is your time. You have to do it. She is extremely smart. She is extremely strategic. She is relentless. She never gets tired. I think she is fuel. I think her veins run on chocolate, because as everyone knows, she just loves chocolate. And part of my duties when that was fun was to sort of figure out what's the best way to ensure that to cook chocolate, because we always had but we would have ongoing wars playing Jeopardy against each other in the downtime between events. We would turn it on, and she is someone who is just and above all that, there is a grace and dignity and power of who she is, and she's an irresistible force. But someone said, the iron fist in the Gucci glove. I just think that's also stereotypical. I think she is just someone who knows how to get things done. She has immense powers of persuasion, and she knows what is right, and she can tap into that. So, you always, when people said they were going to challenge her, I just figured at some point they were going to become her biggest cheerleaders. She's co-opted the squad, which initially was, very much against her. When she lost the speakership in 2010, people said, "Oh, she's going to resign." And I was on HuffPost in 20 minutes after that with an editorial saying, "There's no way in God's green earth is she going to resign. She is going to stay on." And people who look at history don't understand history. Rayburn, McCormick, these people flipped being speaker back and forth all the time. No one said, "Oh, you lost one, Rayburn, time for you to quit." No, she was not going to quit. And thank God for that. Thank God for that. Having her steward the administration's work and the strategy that she brings to bear is something that is just a sight to behold. And I'm glad that so many people recognize that, because it's been there all along.
Well, if you're just tuning in, I wanted to remind our listeners that you are hearing and watching, if you're on YouTube, Michael Yaki is a political analyst with KRON4 TV news channel in San Francisco, and he's also a local Mindanoman here
Our
along
neighbor.
our neighbor. And I
You can see me on the golf course a lot.
and I first found out about Michael on one of the Facebook posts, and I saw the Sea Ranch sheep behind him.
Can you share these photos?
Yes. And before I do, I just want to let everybody know that this is KGUA in Gualala, 88.3 FM. We are streaming around the world at kgua.org, on apps Radio Garden and Tune In. I'm Lindsey. This is Peggy Berryhill. And now we are going to actually share that clip with you that Michael shared with us that you created. Now, give a little talk about what we're just about to see and hear.
Well, if it's about the sheep, I
Yes.
like doing podcasts on different measures. And that was, I was driving to the store. They had, you know, as you know, Sea Ranch has the shepherd that does the fire suppression, and
Leland Falk.
Yes. There they were. I thought, sheep, herd immunity, and here we go.
All right, and with that, we are going to now play that segment from Michael Yaki.
Hi, this is Michael Yaki. Welcome to the Politically Smart Ask. I'm sheltering in place in Sonoma County, joined by some friends of mine here to talk about a big public policy debate going on right now, and that is herd immunity and whether or not it should be applied to the coronavirus in the United States. Well, let's take a step back. Herd immunity is a term that developed in the 1930s from scientists studying the measles, who discovered that as more and more children became infected by the measles, infection rates started to slow down and eventually drop. And they figured out that the more that young people became infected, the less opportunity the measles had to latch onto someone and continue the spread of the infection, to the point where there's a saturation point or a herd immunity that developed where it just couldn't go any further. And they made an analogy to the animal kingdom when you have herding animals, such as sheep.
And that's the end of the clip.
That's the end of the clip. Okay. Thank you, Michael.
Well,
What's
I
the
didn't
rest
want
of
to give you
that?
too much, but I mean, essentially,
Okay.
it was going into the whole idea of why vaccinations can help promote herd immunity, but also the fallacy of the people who just thought, well, why don't we just all get sick and have herd immunity? Well, you could do that, but you would lose like 10% of the population if you try to do it that way. And you know, all these, I think Sweden was trying that, and Sweden was showing some of the highest death rates in Europe at the time. So there you go.
Well, it's pretty clear that not getting vaccinated, if we look at the global numbers, and actually the United States is really rising way high in those deaths, but
Right.
that it's not going to work that way. And especially with something new. You know, what do you think is kind of an offshoot of this, but we're having so much misinformation, disinformation, craziness spread, particularly by social media. This is a newer platform in a sense that we've never had this before, that spreads to millions of people and believe all of these crazy things that you're going to get magnetized, or they're putting chips in your body and all of that. How do we combat that?
I mean, it's funny. It's really not so. When you think about the word social, you're talking about a broader group. But social media is not social. It's very narrow. I would call it narrow media because it essentially enables you to tune out what's really going on and only basically listen to an echo chamber of your own choosing.
I've heard that.
So that I think is where the quote unquote social media platforms are failing. I mean, you know, we can go into a long discussion about how public schools and the socialization and all the other things that helped create who we are, the melting pot. Well, we're no longer that. We are these kinds of platforms are creating individual ingots of rusty metal that are not blending together, that can cut and can hurt people. And you know, when people are going, you know, to their vet to buy horse deworming medication rather than getting the vaccine. I mean, what is the insanity of I'm going to put anything else in my body except that which has been approved by the FDA, right? Anything, I'm going to do everything I can not to put in my body something that even Trump got, which was the vaccine. I mean,
Right.
that is just, it at some point, it just becomes crazy, except for the fact that they're not hearing anything else. Until they begin hearing everything that is out there, you get these situations where social media is just amplifying, the voices in people's heads that are saying, yeah, bleach, yeah, dewormer, yeah, whatever. So,
Well, is that something the Civil Rights Commission might be looking at some point?
it's interesting. There's a fine line between civil rights and civil liberties. And we are firmly in the suspect category branch, which is looking at those things which are immutable: race, color, creed, national origin, religion, sexuality. This social media kind of crosses through all those because it goes to really the First Amendment. What is going on, the freedom to put whatever it is that is out there that you want to put out there, but the responsibility at the same time to ensure that you're not sending people down a radical path. And this goes into another philosophical discussion that we could go on for eons. But democracy is the only form of government that can essentially decide to vote itself out of existence. Going back to my earlier theory about Hitler. And unless you have an educated populace, unless you have people who understand, unless you have people who experience what other people are experiencing, which goes into my theory that we need national service. We don't need them all in the army, but national service can be the proxy for the kind of melting pot that we need to get people to understand and appreciate all the differences and the glories of diversity that is America. We can't live in silos and exist as a country. We can't bunker and exist as a country much longer. We need to understand what's going on in reservation country. We need to know what's going on in Appalachia. We need to know what's going on in Maine, in the deserts, on the coasts. We need experienced people who have all those, who can bring all that to bear so we appreciate and understand and can reach each other. And we're not doing that right now. We're just buzzing around our own echo chambers, feeding the voices in our head saying, government is bad and I need to take a dewormer rather than take a vaccine in order to protect myself against the worst pandemic in 100 years.
Hey, Peggy, I think it's obvious. Hey, Michael, you've got to come back on every month. There's just too much to talk about.
There's a thing. You're absolutely, Leanne, I mean, being our neighbor here, I'm going to move into another direction now.
I shop at both your sponsors, by the way. I just want you to know.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I mean, this whole thing of our being siloed and not meeting each other and understanding, and again, being in public media, that's been my whole life, is to introduce you particularly to Native people, contemporary Native people, which now TV is doing great with Res Dogs and all of these great shows, but TV isn't necessarily real life. So we have to get to know each other better and understand each other better. I'm absolutely there with you because we have a lot to offer. Okay, I'm going to switch to right here in our backyard, this is happening everywhere. We're seeing a huge shift in demographics. We're seeing a change in ownership of homes, our businesses, and COVID has done so much in such a short time. No one was expecting this. It's a totalitarian leader of its own in a sense. So now we're all concerned. New people moving in, a type of wealth we haven't seen before, local people having to move out because they can no longer afford their rents or leases. Right. There go the employees. How are you going to start a business? What is your crystal ball say about how we're going to change this dynamic or how we're going to work with it?
I mean, this is a debate you have at the pro shop on the 18th green and in Surf or in Gualala Market at Two Fisher Trinks with people. My wife and I were fortunate to buy our home, almost over 20 years ago here. We used it for weekends and long weekends and holidays. And then a few years back, we moved up here permanently because my job enabled me to do it. And we track what's been going on. And you're right, what the real estate market is experiencing is insane. You have a lot of long timers deciding, how can I pass this up? And they're selling and moving on. And who can blame them? Who can blame them? But you're right. You see businesses advertising, $25 an hour in health benefits and not being able to attract people anymore. You wonder how the hotel. People went by the jobs fair for the lodge, and you would, in 10 years ago, you expect a line of people out there, and you could throw a rock around different parts of there and not hit anyone who was there. So I wonder how they're going to be dealing with the labor shortage. Obviously, the root of all this is it goes to the fundamental underpinnings of what our economy is like. We have been in this area a tourist economy for quite some time. We've not been a large residential community, which is a different kind of thing. That meant that there was a lot of housing still available. People weren't moving up here because they were afraid of catching things and so I kind of get a kick out of looking at the Sea Ranch forum on Facebook, where people are asking about where is the nearest city amenity, right, that they talk about, and I understand
where's Target.
Yeah, exactly, right. So or the person said, where can I get a mailbox? But the Sea Ranch has struggled with this over time too, with regard to the housing that it provided and the conditions of that housing for a lot of its workforce. We have to do better. We have to figure out a way to deal with the fact that you can't expect to have the kind of demographic shift that we're experiencing right now, and the people who would want to work and serve and work in that community can't be living 2.5 hours away. They're not going to. They're just not going to make that drive. They'd rather, find a job in Santa Rosa or somewhere else than make that trip up here. And unless we can figure out a way to create more and better affordable housing in this area, where we're limited by things like the Coastal Commission and the Forest Service and all sorts of things that we've lived with for years but never had to encounter now in the kind of proportion we're doing right now. Businesses who think that they're going to be doing something up here are going to have a very different awakening, in the next few months or so. And I think that even the people who have moved up here full time are going to realize that maybe if you have a small family, depending on what your expectations are, that's going to change too. So maybe this is just a pendulum shift. Maybe next year things will start to go back to pre-COVID stasis, and homes will open up and people can move back in. But right now, leaders have to start thinking about what this really means for our community, and have a real open and honest dialogue on what we need to do.
We are out of time.
Oh no!
I
saw the hook coming out. I was going, oh, I better wrap up.
You're good at that. You get that intuition. We're going to have to leave you, Michael. That was the last word for today, but we would certainly invite you back soon.
Anytime.
To be a part of our KGUA regulars. And we look forward to meeting you, Michael Yaki, attorney, consultant, U.S. Civil Rights Commissioner, so many things in your background.
Analyst.
Watch me on KRON4 election night.
KRON4 election night. And you got to show this one last picture before we go, Leigh.
Okay, we're going to go into Native America Calling in just a bit. We're going to play this clip first for you. That was another one that he shot with Hila of Two Fish upstairs in that beautiful, beautiful bar. I'm going to now switch to share screen so that people on YouTube can see this, and we'll play this. And then
This
What's
was
that?
early in the pandemic. This, I think it was April.
Oh,
Oh,
April
okay.
of last year.
Yeah.
I
Okay.
love
yeah.
this photo. Thank you. Take care.
Here we go. Thank you very much,
Thank you,
Michael.
everyone.
We'll talk to
Thank
you
you.
next time.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Hi, behind this mask and gloves is Michael Yaki, the politically smart ass. I'm here with Hila Oppenheimer, the owner of Two Fish Bakery in Sonoma County. Welcome to the politically smart ass. Hello.
Thanks for having me.
Now you have a great business here. I love.
And with that, we're going to say goodbye to everyone on Peggy's Place. I'm Leigh and Lindsey along with Peggy Berryhill, and we're going to go now into Native America Calling. And that show will repeat again at 1 p.m. today.
Peggy's place.
Peggy's Place will repeat today at 1 p.m. And this is KGUA in Gualala.
Newman or wild rice. The lawsuit alleged the state failed to protect water resources and endangered the crop and violated tribal members' treaty rights to harvest it. The Minnesota Department of Natural Resources was seeking an injunction in U.S. federal court. The state said White Earth did not have jurisdiction over DNR or its employees. Minnesota's Attorney General responded to the dismissal, saying precedent is established that federal courts have jurisdiction to review tribal court jurisdiction. One of only 9 remaining clan houses in Sitka, Alaska, is on the verge of collapse. The historic property is deeply rooted in Sitka's clan traditions